Hello, this is the story of how polyfluorotetraethylene, brand name Teflon, has poisoned almost the entire world with perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA, which is cancer-causing. The amount of PFOA in the average person isn't necessarily harmful, but nevertheless, PFOA can be found in dolphins off Florida, the rain in Tibet, household dust, in food, in water. It's basically everywhere. Yay!
It's a silent threat lurking where you'd least expect it.
They are known as forever chemicals.
They are being increasingly detected in the water of thousands of American communities.
Good thing it's Teflon.
Cookware never leaves Teflon. If it has DuPont, Teflon.
Polyfluorotetraethylene, PTFE, was discovered by accident in 1938 by a chemist working for DuPont, which is now Dow DuPont, which I hope paid a graphic designer $1 million for this logo. PTFE is hydrophobic, low friction, and non-reactive, meaning it makes an ideal lining for anything containing certain industrial chemicals, pipework, an ideal sealant for machinery, and an ideal non-stick coating for, of course, kitchen utensils.
But thanks to brilliant Tefal technology, the fryer is actually cool to the touch. We cannot, however, guarantee the same for the contents.
It was patented in 1941, and the Teflon name was trademarked in 1945, with DuPont calling it the most slippery material in existence. Imagine the man-hours that went into the most slippery or slipperiest series of meetings. Teflon was used across many sectors right from the get-go, generally as a lubricant and coating. By 1948, DuPont was producing around 2 million pounds of Teflon every year at its Washington Works plant in Parkersburg, West Virginia. The same year, the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company, now called 3M, acquired the patent for a chemical process for creating compounds from fluorine. Manhattan Project scientists, several of whom landed at 3M after the war, had already used fluorine to separate the uranium used for early nuclear weaponry. Their new patented chemical process could create novel materials like PFOA, which is often simply called C8 in DuPont internal documents. PFOA is also non-stick and hydrophobic, and can be used as an emulsifier, an insulator, and a suffocant. Basically, it has a lot of industrial applications. In 1950, 3M signed a deal to sell PFOA to DuPont, which wanted to use it to make Teflon, and by 1951, DuPont was using PFOA in the manufacture of Teflon to smooth out the final product's physical properties and make application of it easier. DuPont ramped up production, and the first US-made non-stick pans hit the shelves in 1961, which was also the year that DuPont's own safety testing laboratory linked C8 exposure to enlarged livers in rats and rabbits. DuPont scientists then got a group of volunteers to smoke cigarettes laced with C8 and found 9 out of 10 people in the highest dose groups were noticeably ill for an average of 9 hours, with flu-like symptoms that included chills, backache, fever, and coughing. At that time, there were very few environmental dumping laws, very few environmental laws at all, and both DuPont and 3M were routinely dumping industrial byproduct, including PFOA, into local rivers. DuPont even dumped barrels of this waste into the ocean, which is indisputable as fishing vessels have, over time, inadvertently caught some. So DuPont knew, as they entered Teflon into the consumer realm, that the C8 in Teflon was toxic. At the same time as 3M were supplying DuPont with PFOA, they were also perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, PFOS, for use in their own products like Scotchgard. It has many of the same health risks as PFOA. In 1975, a University of Florida researcher found a type of fluoride in his own blood that hadn't been detected in blood before. By 1977, the University of Florida had linked this new type of fluoride in blood with 3M manufactured PFOS. Further research led them to find that PFOS was present in blood samples from as far back as 1957, and as of their research in the late 70s, it was found in blood samples taken from everywhere in the world. In 1978, 3M did its own study on rats and monkeys and concluded that both PFOS and PFOA were toxic, and that their levels were building in the blood of their own workers. The company decided not to contact the Environmental Protection Agency and not to publish its studies where all of its test monkeys died after acute exposure. In 1981, 20 years after DuPont's own toxicology chief said PFOA, C8, should be handled with extreme care, DuPont moved all women out of the Teflon manufacturing division after 2 of 7 pregnant women gave birth to children with otherwise unexplainable birth defects.
He was born with half of a nose, 1 nostril, a serrated eyelid, and a keyhole pupil where the iris and the retina is not connected.
Through the 80s and 90s, DuPont and 3M continued to monitor the level of these chemicals in their own workers and across the world. Internal documents since obtained paint a picture of a profitable but precarious position for both of them. They were concerned that there would be a tobacco industry type showdown should their own internal research come to light. So they kept quiet, hoped they could limit the spread of PFOA and PFOS, but 3M realized it needed to discontinue using PFOS in its own products, which it did in the year 2000. Their share price even rose. DuPont, however, had no intentions of slowing down their use of PFOA. In 1998, a cattle rancher in West Virginia and his family sued DuPont, claiming around 280 of their cows had died due to the DuPont landfill next door. DuPont had purchased the land for the landfill from the family in the 1980s and promised to use it as a non-hazardous landfill, but instead they dumped PFOA byproduct straight into the land's creek, which led into the Ohio River. That case was settled in 2001 for an undisclosed sum, but while acting as the plaintiff's attorney, Robert Billett obtained a tremendous amount of DuPont's internal memos.
It says C8 in the stream, we never told them, right? See that?
That's what it says.
He started a class action suit against DuPont, representing around 80,000 people in the Ohio Mid-Valley area, at the same time as passing on information to the EPA. In 2005, the EPA settled with DuPont for $16.5 million for withholding information, which is something like 0.1% of its revenue. At the same time, this was the largest fine in the agency's history. DuPont agreed to stop using PFOA by 2015, and they did, and they stopped using it for Teflon on pots and pans before then. That same year, 2015, Billott's public action suit came to fruition, settling for over $100 million, with DuPont agreeing to pay more should direct links between PFOA and specific diseases be met. They also agreed to instill water filters, pay for some community health care, work with an independent study, and still be open to other individual lawsuits. There were other lawsuits too. In February 2017, DuPont settled over 3,500 PFOA lawsuits for $671 million, but they got to deny any wrongdoing, which is definitely not nothing, but it wasn't any sort of rebuke. It was just the cost of doing business. Both DuPont and 3M, I would argue, knew a settlement like this was inevitable, and they both factored the loss of this particular group of toxic chemicals in their manufacturing processes in their long-term plans. Both companies provably knew about the health effects on animals and, in quotes, the potential health effects on people, but they both continued dumping into rivers and hiding their findings, and DuPont was doing that until at least 2001. So they stopped using the toxic component in Teflon and switched to something better. Right? Right? Wrong. In 2015, DuPont founded the Chemours Company, which, among other things, manufactures organofluorine, trademarked as GenX. DuPont uses GenX, which it started manufacturing in 2009, as a replacement for PFOA, but it poses very similar potential risks to health. It's been shown to cause cancer in lab animals. In 2017, Chemours was caught dumping GenX into the Cape Fear River. The following year, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality fined DuPont $13 million and ordered them to filter water and slow down on that dumping, please. Then, in 2022, the Virginia Roanoke River was found to have 1.3 million GenX parts for every trillion parts. For reference, the Michigan drinking water maximum allowed level for GenX is 370 parts per trillion. The EPA says GenX is linked to cancer, immunosuppression, and especially problems with the kidneys, but until 2021 it was virtually totally unregulated. The good news is that as of 2023, the EPA is about halfway through its regulatory roadmap. It says it aims to stop GenX and other PFAS from entering the environment and clean up what they can. The bad news is companies like DuPont have no incentive to stop doing this. Maybe chemicals like these can never be produced without toxic byproduct, but surely that byproduct can be properly stored or cleaned. It's just that doing that is way more expensive than just dumping it and paying some people a sliver of your fortune 20 years later. 20 years later, when you can obfuscate responsibility. You could have gotten cancer from anywhere. DuPont has $45 billion worth of assets. $1 billion worth of fines and settlements might not be nothing, but I bet it's cheaper than doing things right. So, the short of it is, industrial innovation far outpaced regulation in the US, and PFOA and GenX are only an example of the chemical byproducts that now pollute the environment world over. Specifically, PFOA average levels in blood decrease every year, but more than 98% of people in the US have it in their blood, and other PFCs too, and it's not expected to disappear from the environment for thousands of years. Yes, old Teflon-coated pans were a factor, but PFOA is in the water because it was dumped there. I think it's a big mistake to not pursue criminal charges against DuPont executives. If instead the risk wasn't losing your job but going to jail, I think that would actually serve as a deterrent to most white-collar criminals. Yeah, I want to be rich. I'm already upper middle class, but rich is better. 10 cars is better than 3 cars, but 3 cars is better than jail. I think that's genuinely how these sorts of people in these positions think. Until then, there is no deterrent. New chemicals will be used and dumped without responsible handling, because responsible handling would be irresponsible to the bottom line. Same as it ever was. So there you go. That's it. A happy ending. Again. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Mwah. Nice little Teflon kiss there. Enjoy the cancer.